afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to welcome you to this virtual dialogue on servitization to deploy energy efficiency. This first dialogue is the first of a series of events that are part of the European Commission Horizon 2020 funded project Efficiency as a Service. The project was launched in June last year with work consortium partners Agoria, Anesse, Base, EIT Energy, and will run until June 2023. The Efficiency as a Service initiative aims to accelerate the market adoption of energy efficient solutions in FMEs through a pay-per-use servitization model where customers only pay for the service they receive rather than the physical product, thereby avoiding the upfront high cost of modern efficient equipment. Efficiency as a Service integrates a financial tool to recapitalize technology provider who take on all the future costs related to operation, maintenance, repair, but also utility costs, giving them the incentive to operate the equipment in the most efficient manner. We will tell you more about the Efficiency as a Service initiative and the tool we have developed by the consortium partner at the end of the webinar. In the first part of today's webinar, you will hear from technology providers who will share with you their experience on deploying servitization, the impact on the market, what convinced them to onboard the journey, and also the hurdles they overcame to do so. In the second session, you will hear from investors who will share with you the various financing models and solutions that enable the deployment of Efficiency as a Service, and also the risks and opportunities associated to these. Each session will be followed by a Q&A session, so please do write the questions that you have in the Q&A chat box, and we will adjust them during the Q&A sessions. So my name is Mirataya. I'm from Agoria, the Belgium Federation of Technology Companies, and Agoria is responsible for implementing Efficiency as a Service in Belgium. I'm hosting this webinar together with Javier Martinez from Anesse, which is the Spanish Federation of ESCO companies. And Anesse is responsible for the deployment of Efficiency as a Service in Spain. Javier will be moderating the first panel session on technology providers' perspective. Then Dimitris Karamitsos from BASE, the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy. BASE is the overall project coordinator, and Dimitris will take you through the second panel session, which will provide the investor's point of view. And finally, Arno Nerolder from the European Institute for Technology and EIT Energy is responsible for implementing the EaaS project in the Netherlands. And Arno will provide you with the concluding remarks of today's virtual dialogue. I'm now very happy to introduce Ian Mckechnie, who will give you some first insights on servitization and its benefits. Ian is Director of Strategic Programs of the Advanced Service Group at the Ashton Business School. Within the Advanced Service Group, Ian leads a specialist team to stimulate change across the manufacturing sector by guiding manufacturers to change their business model through servitization. Ian's work over the last 9 years involved mentoring more than 350 manufacturing firms to help them design their own advanced service blueprints and value-centric business model. Prior to this, Ian spent 20 years as a professional engineer and now uses his business and engineering experience to support manufacturing SMEs to grow value of their business through advanced services. Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mira. I will take responsibility for hosting.
Yes, you should be able to share your screen now, Ian.
Okay, thank you. Continue. Thank you, Mira. Can I just check that you can see the screen?
Yes, we do, Ian.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you for the welcome and the introduction, Mira. I'm delighted today to be talking to the panelists and the delegates about servitization. It is our core area of interest at the Advanced Services Group. And I'll just take a few minutes to run through some of the materials that we have and to give you a sense of servitization, advanced services and the benefit that can be gained from using new business models in the energy environment. So to start the session, I will pick up on my role, a bit more about the Advanced Services Group, and it's my pleasure to be a member of the advisory board for the EaaS project. And I'm delighted to be working with Dimitri and colleagues to help share our experience of business models in this new way. So I'll pick up on servitization. I've also been asked to talk about some of the market trends and growth in servitization areas, and perhaps something that we can do to help accelerate implementation to energy efficiency markets through the use of new business models. So the Advanced Services Group, we're based at the Business School in Birmingham in the UK. We are now in our 10th year, led by an academic called Professor Tim Baines. He's our executive director and the #1 cited academic in the world for servitization and the term advanced services. So we are about 30 strong. We focus on servitization and advanced services only, but we are focused on many sectors because our work on business models transfers and is quite ubiquitous in the way that we can support industry. And a lot of this started by the book that Tim wrote probably almost 10 years ago now, called Made to Serve, where he recognized that there were large organizations earning more than 50% of their revenues purely through services, and that the margins were much higher. So his investigation and research has led to where we are today. And that brings us to elements such as our big 3-day event later in this year called Servitization Live, where we actually make these things real for industry. And we bring exhibits along to showcase how these work. So what does servitization really mean if you haven't come across the term in the past? Well, basically a manufacturer can offer a product, and they may offer a warranty, spares, and maybe just making the product available. As they start to offer more intermediate services, they may offer training and help desk or some other maintenance and scheduled overhauls. And that is really about focusing on the product condition. So you start by making it available, and then you make sure that it is efficient and effective. Where we're interested is in the area of advanced services. And it really switches on its head at this point. This is where responsibility for the use of the asset is in the main still owned by the manufacturer, but the customer takes the capabilities that they are really interested in. And it's all about making their business more successful. So that's where we operate. When you start looking at it, this can be quite daunting for many firms. And this is a real word cloud from an interview from a chief exec that in the transport sector spent 10 years taking the firm from 50 million euro to 600 million euro. And to help counter that, the research that Tim and colleagues at Aston developed is really this transformation roadmap. And what that does is it gives you examples of things that you will experience as you move from left to right on this slide. So you start off by exploration. What is servitization? What might it mean to me? Can I make money from it? Then as you get a little bit more information and knowledge about it, you get into this engagement stage where you get management buy-in from your organization, and you start looking at how could you possibly create a new value proposition and deliver that to our existing and potentially new customers. And as you move into this blue area, you start to develop little pilots with existing customers. And that gives you the sense of scale. It gives you a real feedback loop in terms of what these new services are doing to the customer, and perhaps what processes might have to change as part of the wider ecosystem now that you're delivering product and service. And when you get the scale and you get that right, and the key performance indicators suggest that you should invest in this, then you move more into this exploitation phase, the 4th phase. And although we refer to it as the exploitation phase, it's really about making the customer more successful. And it's about positive exploitation. It's about minimizing the use of resources. It's about providing a service as a capability which minimizes the amount of resource or raw material that's required to deliver the original need that the customer had. And you'll notice on this map, there are at the cardinal compass points in the north, there's market-centric forces, the customer asking you to do more. In the south, it's about technology-centric, so things like Internet of Things, IoT, the use of sensor data, etc. So there's a lot more that we can help and explain on this model, but where we lead with it is that we build into 4 elements of a business model. So as we're working with manufacturers in the main or technology innovating firms, we spend about 60% of our time in the top left box here, which is all about developing the customer value proposition, starting with the segmentation, looking at pains and gains, looking at critical factors that you would need to have in place to deliver the service. And that takes us to the top right-hand side, where we focus on the value creation and delivery. This is all about the skills and the people and the mechanisms and the technologies that you have that you need to be able to deliver the value to the customer. And I believe we probably spend about 10% of our knowledge sharing time there, but obviously the companies spend more time on their own in that area. The bottom left is all about the revenue model. This is about how you capture the value and you're paid for what you deliver for your customer. The bottom right, the competitive advantage. This allows you to be really innovative in there, and it looks at other market opportunities where you can use your new model to help the customer and bring in new customers to take that offering forward to the market. One of the important tools that we use at the very start of our conversations with firms new to advanced services or servitization is a services staircase. And again, you will note the color coding, and that really represents the base, intermediate, and advanced. And what we want to do is use some of our materials and mini guides to perhaps use performance advisory. So the top of the purple box there, using sensor technology and information and feedback and data to help us understand how to provide more value to the customer. And as you get more intimate with the customer, you enter into the blue area where it's all about the asset capability or the process capability or the platform capability. And from an energy perspective, this is a really good thing because you're finding ways to provide heat or cooling as a service. You're finding ways to reduce your original raw material input costs and perhaps find ways to be innovative with energy reduction. I was also asked to pick up perhaps some of the mega trends, and one that I wanted just to flag very, very briefly today was one that one of my colleagues, our report, Dr. Chris Owen undertook, was all about green and resource scarcity. And we're seeing an increasing level of interest in environmentally friendly products and services. And we're driven there by the climate emergency. So there's lots that we can do through advanced services and servitization and new business models to help the energy sector. We just need to have the conversations. An example of some of the case studies we've got, and I've highlighted 6 there because of the energy related elements of them. But you'll see Nederman, filtration, clean air. You'll see Alstom looking at energy saving on their trains. Caterpillar looking at using sensors to reduce the fuel burn time and the idle time. And Goodyear reducing tires, the use of perhaps using innovation to help reduce fuel reduction and carbon emissions, but at the same time providing more advanced services to their customers. And there are many others. We've got lots of examples of some of the smaller companies, and an example perhaps more pertinent today is our digital servitization demonstrator with BD Arthur Mayer, where we're spending about €2 million in the UK, building a physical and digital demonstrator to show how we can deliver heating as a service to huge areas of the UK through distributed networks. And I've flagged just some of the partners there and some of the models. We have more help available for firms should you be interested in it at a later date. And there are a number of ways that you can engage with the Advanced Services Group. And I think that's my time up now, Mira.
Thank you very much, Ian, for this introduction. I'm just checking if there are any questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please, you can type them now. Perhaps one question from my side. How can a company know, you've talked about the competitive advantage, and how can a company know whether servitization has the potential to create a competitive advantage for the company?
Okay, that's a really good question, Mira. I think there's two things I would respond with there. One, we use a very simple tool called Unlock Your Insight, which is available to everyone, unlockyourinsight.co.uk. And that helps companies understand where there is potential through services. And it's a real good starting point for many companies that are unsure. For those that are more certain, I would perhaps suggest looking at some of the advanced service business model templates that we have, because as I mentioned in the 4-quadrant model, unless companies start to think about their own operations in that way, they will find it very difficult to move from this single transaction of selling a product into the provision of services. So, you know, the other starting point perhaps would be to get them to think about their segmentation of the market. Who are they actually looking to deliver that product and service to?
Mm-hmm. And you've accompanied quite a number of companies through that, more than 350. Are there any sectors for which there is the most benefits or opportunities for servitization? Have you noticed maybe a sectoral trend?
Okay, well, certainly energy, and I think demonstrated by our work with Baxi in the UK on the digital demonstrator. I think transport also plays a big role. We see the food sector as another area, and aerospace. I think these are perhaps the top 4 that I would suggest at the moment. And I think we've got examples of 2 large companies and 2 small companies that would fit into these sectors really well. And again, perhaps maybe through Q&A or at a later stage, we can give you more evidence of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Ian. I think it's time to move. So if any of you have still questions for Ian, please do send us, and we will forward them to Ian to maybe create a further discussion. I will now give the floor to Javier, who will introduce the participants for the first panel on the technology provider's perspective. Javier, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mira, for your presentation. Now I have the pleasure to present to you the next panel, the next section. The name of this session is Technology Providers, presenting an example of a service business model. So as you can imagine, the experts, we are going to explain how the servitization is applied through different business cases. Okay, so as you can, if we're thinking about the program, there will be 3 experts in this session. Each expert has 10 minutes to present their presentation. And at the end of the session, all of you can ask the questions. Now give me briefly present of each expert. First, we are going to have the pleasure of listening to Eduardo Moreira. He will talk about the concept of light as a service, and he will explain a successful case in this sector. Eduardo works as a global services director at Signify. Then we will have Alex Whale, who is the product manager at Delta EE, and she works as a sustainable energy engineer. Alice is going to explain a case of heat as a service in commercial and industrial sectors. And finally, we will have the pleasure to listen to Tomás Sanz de Santa Maria. He will explain an example of cooling as a service. And Tomás Sanz is the project director at Green Yellow. So remember, each expert have 10 minutes, and then you can write the questions in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we will read it. So Eduardo, please feel free to begin whenever you're ready, please.
Thanks, Javier. Good day, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, if you're hearing from the other side of the Atlantic. Let me share my screen. I think that I need to should be, yeah. Here it's working now. So please just confirm that if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Very good. So very interesting presentation, by the way, Ian, and the dialogue with Mira. Thanks for that. As Javier said, my name is Eduardo Moreira. I'm from Signify. I will present what Signify is if you don't know. And I'm here to talk about our experience helping customers to turn CAPEX into OPEX, so capital expenditure into operational expenditure, and generate free cash flow. Also, the way that the models like Light as a Service helped our customers to benefit from everything that lighting can bring without many headaches. But before that, let me just thank Base, Agoria, Anasi, IET No Energy, and also my co-speaks here, Zia and Alex Thomas, and the two of them that you're going to hear after me. And about Signify, we are Signify, and we provide high quality lighting products, systems, and services. And we make these with a very clear and simple purpose: to unlock extraordinary potential of light for brighter lives and for a better world. And for this, sustainability is one of the cores of our purpose. And I would say this is the core of our purpose, not only because we have innovative, environmentally friendly solutions, but also because we make this to improve people's lives and also the way that we operate as a company, helping also other companies, governments, and people to operate better. And we don't do this only by saying, and this is not only our purpose. We have achieved 100% carbon neutrality last year. So we have become, in September last year, 100% carbon neutral, also using 100% renewable energy as well in all our facilities. And as we have done that, our new goal is to double this positive impact that we make to the society to 2025. We are a company that we employ 37,000 people in 74 countries. We generated 6.5 billion euros sales last year, and this is more or less twice what our nearest competitor makes. And we make these around 75% on our sales on professional lighting. We are global leader on conventional LED and connected lighting systems and services. And we also have been nominated industry leader in our category of electrical components and equipment in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index in 2019, 18, and 17. And you might know that signifies our company name, but we were founded as Philips in Eindhoven in the Netherlands 130 years ago. And we are leading the lighting industry since then with innovation, serving professional and consumer markets. And you might not see, and actually you don't see Signify as a brand in the shops, but you see more than 50 brands that we have, and Philips being our primary brand for lamps and luminaires. And in the professional space, you see also Interact as the software that manages our connected lighting system. And it's a bit about connected lighting systems that I want to say something here, because you know that lighting can help you to achieve many benefits. However, connected lighting helps you to go beyond that. Some examples that I want to also share with you. You can have your facility managed remotely, avoiding you to have unnecessary maintenance visits to the site, especially these days that we are living today. We also have systems to reduce the time that you spend doing emergency lighting audits to respond quickly to maintenance and unsafe situations, helping you minimize energy as well. LED can bring 50 to 70%, sometimes 80% of light energy savings. However, when you bring connected lighting controls, advanced sensors like DDR, scheduling, lighting behavior, even you can save more than that, additional 20 to 50% more. You also have the ability to change the light behavior, thinking about the shifts over the day, operating differently, light where it's needed, reporting energy, also taking benefit of everything that energy saves goes, or like tax benefits, certifications like LEED, carbon footprint reduction, welcoming citizens for in the public space, users like streets, sport facilities, parks, outdoor venues, attracting visitors, as well as improving productivity of the company. An interesting case, for example, lighting sensors that give you heat map where your people are passing, for example, in a warehouse, so you can also optimize your own operation because of the lighting. Yeah. However, we know that this is great, but companies, governments, they face a lot of hurdle on investing in lighting for getting these benefits. Yeah? There is little time to organize this, difficult to justify the investment, or sometimes the money that you want to invest is in your core business. And we see also fear on complex models, people that want to avoid risks on implementing new systems, innovative like connected lighting. And I think that is where we position our lighting as a services offering, because we aim to have a model that is easy to experience, goes end to end. It goes from all the design, build, operation, maintenance, with guaranteed KPIs. Also in your operation, not only KPIs that bring you quality of light, including connected lighting behavior, energy savings, operational efficiency, and as well focused on what matters to you, that is your business. And I want to explain how light as a service looks like using a real example, of course, with round numbers here, but imagine here, let's say a mid-size industrial site, but it could be any retail shop, it could be a sports facility as well. But let's say that this site has a yearly spend of 100K on lighting related energy and maintenance. So this, let's have this example. And in this example, if I want to bring new LEDs lighting as well, system, connected lighting system, it might be that I need a budget of 200,000 euros to make this happen. And let's say that we have a typical, what is also common in this environment, 20 to 25 return over the invested capital, meaning by investing 200K, I would be able to save 50K energy. Yeah, so to upgrade this installation, so you have here this payback of 4 or 5 years, but the problem that what happens is you don't have this money, or if you have this money, you want to make this in your core business, and you don't want to have this in your outside of your core business in lighting. And this is where actually light as a services comes to the purpose, because light as a services in here works in a model that turns CapEx into OpEx. So our model is, I don't have the initial investment. I pay only a yearly, monthly fee, depends on the subject on this. Also, we try also to create an initial saving for you, for your company, creating 10 to 20K in this example, initial saving. So you start benefiting from the day one, and maybe after the years, when the contract ends, you also get the full benefit of the energy and maintenance savings that the new implementation have got, depending as well the way that we create end of services situations, since you might want even to extend the contract or even do a new renovation. And that is real example, if we see here also the behavior that the cash flow goes, you create, first thing, that you create cash flow from the day one. In the traditional CapEx investment, you need to invest first. In light as a services models and as a services models, what we try to do is that you don't need to invest anything. You already have cash flow positive from the day one. And if you go over the years, you're creating here in this example, 100,000 euros of cash after 10 years. So it's interesting that you are in a model that is a hassle-free, design, build, maintenance, operation, guaranteed performance commitments as well over the contract duration. And sometimes also important to say, it could qualify as off balance sheet financing, depending on the way that your accounting team treats these type of investments. We have made also several projects over the world. Just to finish, I want to take you through some of the examples. ArcelorMittal in Spain, in Sagunto, improving safety, comfort of the workers, hassle-free for them. So we are taking care of saving energy, reducing maintenance costs, and the customer is very pleased what we have done there. We also have high-tech campus parking in Eindhoven, known as the smartest square meters building in the Netherlands, hosting 140 companies there, including our headquarters. Also that we have made 70% reduction on the energy, and they are operating under a light as a services model as well. Praxis and Brico stores, do-it-yourself stores in Benelux, that we have upgraded 120 stores in 2 years. That is also a very nice example. And last but not least, an example on the Antwerp Management School in Belgium. That is office space of the Antwerp Management School, where the last concept took the initial investment. So we take care of the initial investment. They don't need to do it. And we focused on the benefit that lighting could bring to them. And I think that those are nice examples. And I truly hope that I could give a glimpse what we can bring on light as a services to you. And if you're excited, you want to learn about more than that, I will leave my contact information here in the next slide. And you feel free to contact me, reach out and LinkedIn or my mail here on Signify or in Signify webpage that you also can reach our local organizations. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Very interesting, the presentation. Now, before next panelist, I would like to remember all of you that at the bottom of the screen, you have the button of question and answers. So please, you can leave all the answers that you have, all the question in the chat. And now I would like to give the floor to Alex, please. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Javier. Well, thanks to BASE, Agoria, NSA, and Energy for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to share my screen so that. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
Now it's perfect.
Seems to be working. Great. So thanks everyone for attending this webinar today. So as Javier said, my name is Alex and I work for Delta Energy and Environment. And today I'm going to give a short introduction on heat as a service. So we were focusing on light with Eduardo's presentation, now shifting the focus on heating appliances. But briefly, before we jump into the main topic of this presentation, I'd like to give you a brief overview of Delta Energy and Environment. So Delta Energy and Environment is a research and consultancy company. We aim to support energy companies in the transition from old to new energy. And by new energy, we understand digitalized, decentralized, and customer-focused systems. We are based in Europe with offices in Paris, where I'm located, but also in London, Edinburgh, Cambridge, and we work with companies from all over the world, really. As you can see on the slides, we focus on a variety of topics. So e-mobility, flexibility, batteries, decentralized power, smart buildings, heat, etc. More recently, we've started to investigate networks and hydrogen. And today, the presentation that I'm going to deliver is based on the research that we do in 2 different services, the new energy business model services that I manage and the heat service. So our research really followed the key industry trends in the different topics that I've mentioned just previously. The aim really is to understand the risk and the opportunity in the new energy market and deliver databases, qualitative insights, and reports to our clients based on analysis that we've done with our knowledge of the market, but also conversation with innovators and key market players in Europe. So we've been investigating the topic of heat as a service for quite a while now. It's been quite trendy in new energy. And one of the questions that we have quite often is actually, what is heat as a service? Because the term has been quite widely used to describe a range of different business models, from what is effectively asset leasing to actually alternative way of paying for heat, so outcome as a service. And the market, the early market, has really focused on leasing, so what we could call product as a service that you can see on the left part of this slide. But it's becoming more and more advanced with more offers being ambitious and models that are delivered through pay-per-use or subscription models. So what we call outcome as a service that you can see on the right part of this slide. And basically the purpose really of heat as a service is to de-risk product acquisition for customers. And this is for this reason that at Delta, we believe that a risk-based definition of heat as a service is actually quite useful to really understand what heat as a service is. And so for us, heat as a service really is an offer where the provider is going to take all of these 5 risks that I'm going to explain in a minute. And the first risk that the provider is going to take is the financial risk, because they're going to take on credit risk by providing a heating appliance for a monthly fee and little to no upfront charge for their customer. The second risk is the technical risk, because the monthly fee that is charged to the customers is going to include some routine maintenance, repairs, appliance replacements, if necessary, within the contract periods. Then the third risk is going to be the performance risk, because the service provider actually charges for a unit of output of heat or for the outcome, so warmth, provided by the heating appliance. The fourth risk is the behavior risk, because the customer is charged whatever its behavior, which means that the service provider takes on the risk that customers actually don't use the heating appliance efficiently. For instance, they could open the window while using the heating. And this risk is borne by the provider. And lastly, the last risk is the energy price risk, because the provider is going to guarantee a fixed cost for the energy provided, so typically over a year. And over this year, the energy price is going to fluctuate, but the provider is going to absorb all this fluctuation. So what we actually see in the residential market today is that most of the offers are still pretty much focused on taking financial and technical risk. So effectively, these types of offers that you can see on the right part of the diagram are just asset rental or leasing. So less complex than a full package heat as a service solution. And really at the center of this Venn diagram, we have only a few offers, such as Eneco and Engie, which are heat outcome as a service and that are not completely at a commercial scale yet. And why is that? It's often because providers are not sure what benefits they can take from offering heat as a service. So we've actually looked at the commercial benefits for providers of offering such solutions to their customers. And what we can see on this bar chart diagram on the right under services is that actually there is a big additional cost for finance that you can see in beige on this diagram. However, what we also see is that it can be completely compensated by operational cost savings. And so the largest cost savings opportunities could come, for example, by selling more efficient appliances or optimizing operations, including energy monitoring, advanced connectivity, and that type of services. So altogether, it means that providers have actually higher revenue and profits on a 10-year period than they would if they were just selling a product. So this is what you can see on the table on the right, with the total profit for services being higher than it would be for products. And on top of that, what we also see is that individual customers are also going to pay less overall on the 10-year contract. So obviously the monthly cost is going to be higher, but since it's fixed, it also means that it helps customers to have a better control of their expenditure, which is also a benefit. So ultimately, the way that we see heat as a service is as an option that brings benefits not only to providers, but also to end customers and eventually the planet as well. We receive a lot of questions around financing from our clients and our subscribers. I will just briefly touch upon it because it will be covered in a later webinar from BASE. But basically, there are three main ways that heat as a service proposition can be financed. The first one is retained revenue, but this is only possible at research and development or pilot phase. It's not suitable for commercial scale. The second option that we see in the market is through equity. So we have companies like Mckechnie, which brand heat pumps as what they call sustainability as a service, and that is quite attracting for sustainable investment funds like Rewind. But debt remains largely the most common in the market, and here we have also a variety of options. So banks, bank-owned leasing company, in-house capital, corporate bonds, and also we have seen some example of crowdfunding. For example, that's what the company Termondo has done. So briefly, before we close this presentation, I would just like to share with you some results from a survey we've done in the residential segment in Europe last year. And we asked interviewees whether they would find a subscription package for heating appealing. And we found out that actually 60% of them would find that type of offer quite appealing. And on top of that, 20% say that their preferred payment methods would be through rental. So we can see that there is a real customer appetite, at least in the residential segment, for subscription packages for heating. And the reason why the market is slowed down is because prospective providers are actually hesitant to develop new offers, and also because it takes time to develop markets and grow services, obviously. So if you'd like to know more on heat as a service, we have a podcast which is called Talking New Energy. It's available on most of the mainstream podcast platforms. And in this podcast, our director, Jean Slow, actually covers various topics of the new energy market. And we've done a few episodes on the topic of heat as a service, where our director discusses with key players of this market on key industry trends. So I invite you to listen to these episodes, but also if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out directly to Delta Energy and Environment, we're always happy to discuss with you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I see a lot of questions in the chat, so it's perfect. And now I would like to give the floor to Thomas Sanz de Santa Maria. Go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Just give me a second. I'm trying to share my screen, and it says that the organizer has deactivated the, I think it just made me. Oh, yes. Now it's allowing me. Give me a second. Okay, thank you very much. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining the Efficiency as a Service webinar provided by BASE. I am Thomas Sanz. I'm here on behalf of Green Yellow. Just a quick word on what Green Yellow is and what we do. We've been 14 years on the market, providing energy efficiency services and projects for different clients. We're also in the solar panel business. We are present in 17 countries and we have over 500 employees. I myself, I'm from Colombia, where I was working in Green Yellow Colombia, and now I'm working in the France office. And today we're going to talk about minimizing the consumption for our clients. This is something we all have in common from what we've talked about here. What we want to do is to diminish as much as we can the consumption of energy from our clients without impacting negatively their performance and their production. And there are many ways to do this. One simple way would be just to sell the technologies, sell the new products that help this happen, and be done with it and let the client deal with it. And that's something we don't want to do. What we want to do is we want to be a partner to our clients throughout time, and at the same time avoid them, help them avoid initial investments. So we finance the whole project. We pay upfront the cost of the project, and the client will pay us throughout time, just like what Eduardo shared at the beginning. And what we also do is we try to help the client implement the most appropriate technology available. We don't sell just one type of technology. We try to integrate different types of systems. So we might use one equipment of one brand and then another equipment of other brand and put them all together to make the system work as best as possible. And the key word here, I think, would be incentives, because what I'm going to talk about here in this presentation is what incentives do we put in place to achieve the most amount of savings and to maintain this savings through time. Because the biggest question here is, okay, we're going to go along with the client, we're going to work with him through time, but what is going to be the business model, and how are we going to promise the client, and how are we going to achieve the savings and show them that we're actually achieving these savings? So just a quick context, before we have the intervention, we usually see this. We see the client who has his energy and gas consumption coming from the regular provider. This is connected to his building and to his machine room. In his machine room, he has chillers, boilers or water heaters, and he produces cold and heat, and he sends this cold and this heat to his building. So he pays his utilities, he produces his own energy, and he consumes it. However, mostly what we see during our audits is that the equipment from the machine room is not always up to date. It's not always in the best state. It's usually a little inefficient, and this is normal because the core business of the client is not having the best machine room in the world, is producing their products and producing them at low cost, so they don't pay that much attention to their machine room. So after the intervention, we come along, we upgrade the machines, we optimize them using controllers, and we install monitoring equipment to monitor their consumption, and not only the consumption of the equipment, but also the output, how much cold energy is being produced or hot energy is being produced and consumed by the building. So the question is, okay, now that we want to do this, how are we going to charge the client? Because of course things cost money. How are we going to charge them for what we did? And this is the solutions we've come up with so far to do this. So the first one is the most classical one. We've used it in thousands of projects, and is energy savings performance contracting. So we engage on the savings, not to be confused with EPC, which would be engineering, procurement, and construction. This is energy savings performance contracting. I'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. There's also cold service agreement or heat service agreement, where we engage on the efficiency of the machine room of the cold water plant or the heat water plant. We say, okay, we expect a certain amount of efficiency, and if this efficiency is obtained, then the invoice or the money we get paid is going to stay the same, and this, of course, is peace of mind for the client. And the other way of doing this would be to sell the heat or the cold that is produced, and put some formulas in place for us to sell this heat, and the client has then incentives to reduce the consumption of heat or augment it if they want. But the price per kilowatt or per megawatt hour of heat is fixed. Now I'm going to talk about all these three models, but keep in mind that these models could be applied to the same project. We could have one idea for a project, let's say change a chiller, for example, and these three models could be applied to the same project. Of course, some projects work better with some other models, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So the first one would be energy savings performance contracting, which what we usually do is we set up a baseline, and we need to know how the consumption of the client of his building fluctuates through time, and on what variables does it depend. The idea of creating this baseline is that when we come along and we install the new equipment, or we make the optimization of the new equipment, we can know how much would the system have consumed if we had not installed our system or our intervention. And by making the difference between what he would have consumed and what he ended up consuming after us, that would be the savings, and that's what we engage upon, what we promise that we're going to achieve. Of course, this is not an easy task. This requires a lot of analysis of the information that he provides with us, and we need to define which variable is more suitable to create this baseline. For some clients, it might be enough to just put the degree days or the outside air temperature and make some correlation between the outside temperature and the consumption. For others, it's more convenient to mix with how many days per year he's open, or per month, or per week, or the production from the client, whichever product they're producing, how many kilograms or how many cubic liters or whatever they're producing, and we can correlate this with the consumption. The internal temperature might be a factor as well, depending, for example, a state or a hotel, the inside temperature, the consumption will not be the same for different inside temperature. If it's 25 degrees, the system is going to consume less energy if it's 20 degrees. So it all depends. And this works great for existing buildings. But if, for example, we want to create a new building, if a hotel comes along and tells us, hey, we want to make a new hotel and we want you to manage the air conditioning, and we don't want to pay for the air conditioning, we want to pay you for the consumption of the air conditioning. It would be really, really hard to create a baseline, because there is no building, because it's not been built yet. So this is something where this model will not work very well. And also, if there are adjustments to the building, it's kind of hard to update the baseline. It's something we have to work hand in hand with the client to agree that his new line of production, for example, has a 5% or 10% affection on the baseline or not. So due to these constraints that I just talked about, we've come up with these other models. So cold service agreement is something similar, but what we do is that we tell the client, okay, you're going to pay us a fixed rate, but we're going to promise a performance for your cold plant or for your heat power plant, and you can consume as much as you want, but we're going to promise a certain performance. So we make some modeling depending on the equipment that we're going to select, and we see, okay, the cost for running this equipment is going to be, we expect it's going to be about 40 euros per megawatt hour thermal. And we fix a contract with the client, and we say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. We put the project in place, we install it, and we see, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. We put the project in place, we install it, and we see, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. We And after installation, we measure how much it actually is costing to produce the thermal energy produced, the cold water or the hot water or whatever it is that we're producing. And if the actual cost is different from what we promised, then there's going to be a penalty to normalize this consumption. In this model, just as in the other one and the one I'm going to talk about next, we can also add more services. It all depends what we negotiate with the client. Of course, each service has an additional cost, and it's, for example, penalties for not being able to achieve the temperature of the water, for example, if it's a cold water plant, or if we want to go a little bit further, the temperature of the room or the supermarket or the hotel or the mall. The temperature inside is also something we can compromise upon, but it all depends on the level of investment that we make into the project and the amount of equipment that we're allowed to touch, for so to say. So this is one way to do it. The other model that is the one that we've worked with BASE, we've talked with them, and it's something that we see that can work very well, is cold as a service or heat as a service. And instead of fixing setting a fixed value and just monitoring the efficiency, the formula we put in place is to sell the energy that we're producing, the cold thermal energy or the hot thermal energy, and giving a discount or deducting from this invoice the consumption from the machine room. So, for example, the client still pays the main counter of gas or of electricity, but the submeter for the machine room, we pay for it. We pay it back to the client. So this is an incentive for Green Yellow to lower as much as possible the energy consumption from the machine room, and to increase as much as we can, as efficiently as we can, the output of the machine room. And the output of the machine room is, of course, cold thermal energy or hot thermal energy. So in a perfect world, when we dimension everything correctly, the cost of selling the thermal energy should be canceled out by what we pay back to the client with the energy submeters. And all that's left is the fixed value that they're supposed to pay to us to recover the investment of the equipment. So in this model, just as in the other ones, the client doesn't pay anything on day one. All the investment is being made by Green Yellow, and he's just paying back as time goes on, as long as the performance is being met. If for any reason in this model we consume more energy than what we expected, then this would impact negatively our invoice, and the client will have peace of mind that he got paid back the inefficiency of the system. On the other hand, if the performance is better, then we're going to get more income. So we have incentives in place to try to be always as efficient as possible.
Sorry, Thomas, we have just 1 minute, okay? Because we have to go to the next session, please.
Perfect. So I just wanted to show you quickly one example that we're putting in place right now, that we're constructing. Is a biscuit factory where we made an audit, and we found out that there was a lot of energy consumption in the chocolate heating, and we put in place a new project where we installed a chiller, and the heat recovered from this chiller was going to be used for heating the chocolate, or for keeping the chocolate melted. This meant a lot of savings, because before it was being heated with electric resistances, and now it's being heated with heat recovery from the chiller. This was put in place as energy savings performance contracting, where we measured the baseline, and we're going to engage, or we're going to compromise on the baseline. But this could just as easily have been set up as a heat as a service or as a cold service agreement, where we would sell the amount of heat being produced by the chiller in the heat recovery and the cold in the evaporator. So this is just one of the projects we have. We have many more, but that's all I have time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your presentation. Now, before we go to the next session, there is a question for Alex in the chat. So Alex, please, one people ask, are clients comfortable with contracting for a long period of time? What happens if the customer cancels the subscription, the contract, before capped repayment?
That's a very good question. Customers from our survey seem pretty comfortable in general to sign for a long period of time. So up to between 10 and 20 years seems quite okay, actually. What happens if they stop paying is a good question. And well, the first way to actually address that issue is to take into account this risk when designing a propositions. So that means that the proposition should be covered by insurance. There are also ways to develop a proposition for specific segments. So for example, working with a housing corporation instead of individual customers. So there are ways to mitigate this risk. But obviously at the service execution stage, if the customers stop paying, what we usually see is that the contract has been transferred. This is what Heat as a service provider are doing at the moment. We haven't seen many examples of recovering the assets. There are cases of ceasing or reducing service provision, but obviously just transferring the contract is the easiest way to address that issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Eduardo, I have a question for you. You talked before regarding the challenge to apply the Light as a Service program. And I would like to ask you what is needed for a facility to benefit from Light as a Service? Is there any focus segment or type of customer?
Yeah, focus segment and type of customers, I would say no, that we have examples in many areas. There is even one example recently for all the sport facilities from a city in Belgium, for example, that is just last week, for example, that we have closed the contract, but we have industries. But I think that the focus for customers are, of course, they need to operate light for a given amount of time, let's say 12 hours per day, needs to be facilities that they operate light, and also the cost of energy. But I would say in continental or also in UK and I, the costs are high on energy. So usually also compensates for a customer to engage on Light as a Services with us. And this, I think that one of the main criteria that we have been seeing customers very successful on enjoying Light as a Services are there when they have multi-site. ArcelorMittal, for example, is one of these examples. Praxis, Maxeda, also another one, because it also helps you to accelerate very fast your implementation. Instead of waiting for having the investment over the years, you can do this in the first year, like 3 or 5 times even more or faster than you would be with your own investment. And this is actually what we have been hearing from customers after they have implemented Light as a Services. So multi-site, customers that use energy or lighting for more than 12 hours, in which the cost of energy is high. But I would say that in Europe, this is the case for everywhere.
Perfect. Thank you. I have the last question for Thomas. Thomas, could you explain us how you monitor the emission reductions? Do you use real-time grams or CO2 per kilowatt hour or an average?
Emission reductions are calculated through, depending on each country's ratio from the energy kilowatt hour to emission reduction, because for example, it's not the same to make a saving of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity in France, for example, where most of the energy is nuclear, to a kilowatt hour of energy in Colombia's coast, where a lot of the energy comes from diesel power plants or gas combustion power plants. So depending on the location where we use the installation, then we make the change or the conversion from kilowatt hours to CO2, and whether the saving was done on electricity or gas consumption from a boiler.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. Sorry because there are questions, but we have to go to the next session. No problem, because we will take note all of your questions and we will write the answer. So after the meeting, we will send you the question and the answer, and of course the presentation. So I would like to say thank you for all the panelists, Eduardo, Alex, and Thomas. And now I would like to introduce Dimitris in order to present the next session. Thank you, Dimitris.
Many thanks, Javier. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Super. So hello, everyone. And for those as well that are joining just now for the second session of our first virtual dialogue on servitization to deploy energy efficiency. So this second panel will dive into the perspective of financiers and investors on efficiency as a service as an appealing business opportunity. So I'll go a little bit quicker because we ran a little bit over time. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure that I would like to present to you our panel of experts that are joining today. And for this, I will share my screen. So warm welcome to Leticia Coradeschi from Suzy Partners, Ian Robertson from Invigors, and Simon Lutzenberger from CSG Meridian. So as our first speaker, Leticia, a brief background. She's an associate at Suzy Partners Energy Efficiency Fund. She's investing in large energy efficiency projects such as retrofits and of commercial or public buildings and industrial processes. She focuses on the Italian, French, and North American markets, and she's closed transactions for value of over 70 million euros. So Leticia, without further ado, I'm giving you access to the screen. Just give me a second.
Thank you, Dimitris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Let me know if
Let
you
me see.
Great. Works.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Dimitris, for the introduction, and also thanks to BASE and to all of the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this first virtual dialogue. As mentioned by Dimitris, I work for Suzy Partners. For those of you who do not know it yet, Suzy is a Swiss asset manager with over 1.5 billion euros in asset under management. And we finance the energy transition mainly through two platforms, the equity platform and the credit platform. So we invest and we finance transaction with equity and debt products across storage, renewable energy, and energy efficiency, with the focus on OECD countries and also in Asia through a dedicated fund which is currently in fundraising. We just had the first close at 81 US dollar millions, and we will start to invest right away. So if we focus a bit on energy efficiency, from a financing perspective, I think there's usually an energy efficiency dilemma. So there are key issues that we usually encounter in this sector. So there is a high granularity of the transaction with a comparatively small financing ticket sizes. There's high complexity of the structure, many stakeholders involved. For example, real estate owners, tenants, beneficiaries, the energy companies, the technology providers, and all of these is usually combined with the low level of standardization of the underlying contracts. So of course, if you put together all of these obstacles, then it kind of creates a vicious circle, because you would see that these projects, you would think that these projects are difficult to finance, and therefore they do not become a priority for the company's management. And these, of course, results in a slow progress and does not foster growth in the energy efficiency market. However, here's the silver lining. We actually found a way to finance energy efficiency projects and make them scalable through facilities and framework agreements with the technology partners and the energy service companies as well. And how did we do this? We implemented a tripartite model whereby every counterparty bears a specific risk and has a specific role in the whole transaction. So SUSI partners, we finance up to 100% of the CapEx, and we bear the credit risk of the end clients. So the risk that such clients could default on the payments over time. The energy service company will install the measure and would be responsible for O&M, which could be, of course, be outsourced as well, and will bear the technology risk. So what we mean is that if the measure installed have some underperformance due to technical issues, and this leads to a non-payment from the end clients. And then the end client, of course, would pay for these services, would pay a service payment fee, which usually would be split between the amortization of the installed CapEx and installed measures and the O&M fee, for example. And in this case, they could bear the commercial risk, meaning, for example, the production volumes, and even though this risk usually is shared with the other parties as well. So through the implementation of this model, we started from 2013, when investing our first energy efficiency fund seemed challenging because of the reason that I mentioned before, so market fragmentation and tough regulatory frameworks in some jurisdictions, to today, where basically we invested 235 million with our first fund. We raised 289 million euros for a follow-up fund, of which approximately 60% has already been invested. And as you can see on the slides that I'm sharing, we invested across European countries with both public sector entities and corporates as end customers, and in every single type of energy efficiency that there is out there. Just as an example, since we had the pleasure before to also listen to Eduardo Moreira from Signify, we actually set up several lighting as a service frameworks agreement with renowned technology partners. And the biggest one we have is actually a global facility of up to 35 million with Signify, whereby basically single transaction will be automatically eligible for financing if certain pre-agreed parameters are fulfilled. And this is a multi-country, multi-currency framework, which helps, of course, both parties to deploy the amount of capital required in a easier and in a fast manner. And with this, I think I leave the microphone again to the virtual microphone to Dimitris.
Many thanks, Laetitia. Very interesting insights. So we'll take some questions. I see that people are writing questions. Don't hesitate to write your questions in the Q&A side of Zoom. I forgot to mention it earlier, and we'll take up these at the end of our last presenter today. So many thanks, Laetitia. So our second presenter today, and I will briefly share my screen for this. There we go. It's Ian Robertson. So we have the pleasure to welcome Ian Robertson. He's the Executive Director at Invigors EMEA, which is part of the Alta Group and which provides a comprehensive range of consultancy services to the asset finance industry across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Ian was formerly the global head of asset management and remarketing at DLL, and he brings a vast experience of all aspects of asset management, and he is an expert in equipment risk management and development of circular economic models. Ian, can you hear us? Are you there?
I'm here, yep.
Super. So I'll make you host. Just give me a second, and then you can share your screen.
Okay, is that clear for everybody?
Super. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, listen, thank you very much, Dimitris, for the introduction, and also to the other organisers of the event for giving us the chance to speak this afternoon. As Dimitris did a pretty thorough introduction on myself, I won't give you any more personal background on myself. We're very limited on time, so I'm going to jump straight into the content. You can maybe see some parallels if you watched the earlier session with Ian from Aston Business School. This picture just really tries to indicate the kind of progression from the services perspective, but it also, at the bottom of the chart, it also talks about the different financing solutions that traditionally have been available in the equipment finance world, and really as clients and end customers get more sophisticated, and the logic becomes much more compelling to move to the kind of services embedded in the solutions. You see many more clients moving towards the right-hand side of the chart. It comes with its challenges, and I think Letizia and some of the others already identified some of the challenges, and we'll come to that. And the guys from Delta also talked about some of the risks, and we'll get into that as well in the discussion. It's maybe worth just really quickly recapping some of the benefits. Again, some of these have already been called out in the earlier discussions. To the end customers, I think it's fairly clear. There's an ability to drive more efficiency, get a lower total cost of usage, and in some certain circumstances get a higher performance. And doing this potentially with using other people's funding, as was illustrated in the previous examples. We also heard from Ian about what the advantages are, or some of the advantages, let's say, for OEMs and vendors. Some of the aspects, again, I think are quite clear. But it's a big point of difference, and particularly in these days, we see a lot of people really focusing on the sustainability benefits, and that's something which I'll talk to at the end of the session around the circular economy in particular, and let's say making better use of equipment in general, and that's something which again, you're starting to see in corporate tenders, people demanding this as part of their solutions. And for the funders, there's clearly an appetite to make money. That's clearly what they're in the game for. There are new risks in the model, and again, we'll come to those in a moment. And that's probably one of the areas that really needs focus and attention, and it's one of the reasons why we've probably seen some lack of adoption and availability of funding to tackle these new business models. So the next slide does talk in a little bit more detail about funding. I won't dwell too long on this particular slide because Letizia actually picked up on some of the points earlier. But the assignment of receivables topic is a very important one to particularly for an OEM, because one of the topics that the OEMs often get caught up on is revenue recognition. It's perhaps diminishing slightly as time evolves and people get more comfortable with recurring revenues over time, but it's definitely a potential barrier for some OEMs to move in this direction. And the assignment of receivable model is one way of let's say working around that particular challenge. The next slide is very busy, and apologies for that. I'm certainly not going to talk to every point on here. But the main point we wanted to identify here is that, you know, there are an awful lot of funders, and as you saw from the first slide, there's quite a lot of different financing products and solutions out there. As a business, we help clients navigate this journey of what's the most appropriate financing model and what are the particularly important and pertinent characteristics that a financing partner need to have, and then helping, you know, again, it was a nice illustration from Letizia, the kind of tripartite type structure that that they have used with Signify. And, you know, this is a very, I think, necessary type of structure at this point in time, where some of the risks are borne by one party and shared in some cases with others. You know, again, I'm not going to talk to all the points on here, but, you know, you need to look at a party that's got, you know, very aligned interests with yourselves if you're an OEM, and you need to have, you know, I would say very strong partnering DNA if you're going to enter into these types of models with other parties. Next slide, as promised, is a quick picture of, it's not exhaustive, but we've tried to call out some of the principal risks that you see in this type of business model. And again, we've tried to present this from a funder or financier's perspective. You know, credit risk, to the points that were raised in some of the early discussions, you know, topic. If a client defaults, typically the assets are not going to be worth what's been paid down already. So the net outstanding balance of the contract probably is not going to be covered by the asset. And so there are various ways of mitigating that risk. But again, that's pretty commonplace. I mean, that's a standard risk that any equipment leasing business deals with. Residual risk is also another topic which some funders, some parties are comfortable taking, others not. And again, that's something that, as Dimitris indicated, that's really my personal background is in this domain of understanding the asset risk and residual risk. Associated to that is, I think the question was asked earlier around utilization and cancellation risk specifically. So again, the asset is retired earlier perhaps than was anticipated. It's very probable, again, depending upon the equipment class that you're looking at, that the contract will owe you some money. So again, having very effective mitigants and other ways of redeploying that equipment. And, you know, this we'll come to in a little bit more depth in the coming slides. I'm not going to talk to the rest. There are, you know, additional risks which have already been, some of them been mentioned as we've gone through the webinar today, around, you know, performance risk, the equipment itself, the servicing risks, and again, you know, that needs careful examination to ensure that you've thought these things through and you've put the appropriate mitigants in place, either with OEM parties, third-party servicing companies, and even to an extent in your own customer contract with the end customer. So conscious I'm galloping through this, but just a couple of minutes on the circular economy, because I think it is a very important topic. The sustainability agenda is very, very high, and funders in particular are crying out for models where there's a strong ESG linkage. So that's something that the asset finance industry and efficiency as a service, using the equipment in a responsible way, looking to extend equipment life cycle, having models in place where you can take equipment back, and that's kind of the kind of first of the clockwise quadrants in the diagram here. So what are you doing to take good care of the equipment? And then the next section is all about, if it does come back, what are your options to take the equipment and repurpose it, perhaps bring it up to the current generation to be redeployed with another client, and, you know, ultimately maybe 2 or 3 life cycles through the discussion. you may be up in a position where the equipment, physically needs to be broken, maybe broken for spares, raw materials, etc. Trying to put the equipment back for a useful purpose at the end of its economic life. So that's very quickly a picture of the kind of circular economy as it relates specifically to the equipment finance industry. Obviously, it differs, considerably equipment class to equipment class, but it is a topic that more and more people and manufacturers are thinking about upfront. And it's where people are actually considering the second life and the modularity and usefulness of the equipment, and actually starting to build that into the design of the equipment. So the last page talks a little bit in more depth about this particular aspect. So asset lifecycle management is terminology that we use to describe this view of the equipment. And again, if you're looking as a financier, you are probably going to, in this particular model, and certainly where equipment classes are relatively new and where there's a heavy element of technology risk, you may well be doing this in partnership with the leasing company, with the OEM. Conscious that we have CHG Meridian coming on, so that they may well talk to this point as well. But essentially, if you are working in partnership with an OEM as a financing company, you want to be very clear on having your goals aligned up front. How are you going to manage the equipment through its life cycle? What are you going to do when it comes to the end of the primary term of the contract that you've made with your end customer? And thinking through all these elements, as well as what I referred to earlier, if you have a default risk and a client stopping paying, what are your alternatives? So again, some of the redeployment options come into the commercial strategy piece, and that might be another residual-based contract. It could be another efficiency as a service deployment. You might put it onto a short-term rental agreement. And so on and so forth. So a number of financing tools that you can use to try and make that asset and piece of equipment out and more productive again, and generate revenue and also mitigate risk. Again, I'm probably at my time, so I won't go through all the steps around operationalization and the systems and processes that you need to have in place. With this model, there's an awful lot, I would say, to be gleaned from using data, and increasingly IoT and smart assets. That's a whole theme in and of itself. But these are areas where there's considerable value to be created. So Dimitris, that's about me. We've included at the back of the deck just a bit of background on the Invigas team and some of my colleagues that are very busy and active in this domain. And we didn't start with an advert like everybody else today, but there's a few comments on who we are as a business there.
Super, Ian. Okay. Many thanks for your presentation and your insights. Very interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you today to our third presenter, Simon Lutzenberger. So I will share my screen. Hello, Simon, nice to see you. So Simon is the head of Sustainable Finance Solutions at CSG Meridian, a group headquartered in Germany with strong experience in supporting its customers to manage and finance technology projects and processes. CSG Meridian specializes in as-a-service, leasing and managing industrial assets for large companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, and public sector clients. Prior to joining CSG Meridian, Simon worked for more than a decade at various international sales and business development positions at Cisco, HPE, Aruba, and also PTC ThingsWorks. So Simon, many thanks for being with us today. The screen is yours.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes. So I'm facing a bug myself. Just give me a second. There we go. Great.
Let me know when you see my screen. It should work now, I think.
It works. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So let me give you a quick introduction. What does CHG Meridian do? For those who don't know us, unlike Ian, well, CHG Meridian has been around for a long time, like more than 40 years now. Initially, they started with traditional IT leasing for mainframe computers in 1979. From there, the company developed further and further. Now, well, while we still do a majority of our business in the IT industry with around 80%, we have now decades of experience also in the industrial space and also in the medical device space. Well, our business model is quite unusual for a bank. So essentially, CHG earns their margins not from interest rate, but instead from the refurbishing and remarketing of the assets once a customer, the first customer who owns the asset, stops using it and returns it. So it's, well, that has been the part of the business where we earn our margins. For, well, essentially constantly, we are over 95% of the equipment being returned, receiving a second life. The less than 5% that are remaining then will get responsibly recycled. And well, at least the raw materials are going to get a second life then. Last year, just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude, we remarketed 880,000 assets. So that's quite a substantial amount. That's what we really do very well. So that's also, well, looking at how we do the financing, that's also where we provide particular value to our customers and clients, because we have, well, a lot of experience what fair market value is going to be expected of the asset at the end of the initial intended usage term. So when talking about as a service models, well, we can take off a substantial amount of the initial investment by just taking that residual value, that expected residual value at the end, and, well, taking it off the initial investment. We really like taking this kind of a risk because that is a risk that we understand quite well. CHG is present in 27 countries now. That's the dark gray areas on the map, but we can also do business in the light gray areas. It just, well, that's what we need to discuss then before. So depending on the kind of project that you would like to do. Well, what you're looking at here, that is essentially one of our technology centers. We have two of them, one near Frankfurt, the other one in Norway. That's where our margins are being generated. Essentially, they organize all the end of use processes, though. They take care of the return logistics. They make sure that, well, if the customer wants that or needs that, the data on the equipment is securely wiped. They do all the refurbishing, and also they take care of the remarketing. When talking about sustainability on a, well, wider scope, on the rooftop of that building, there's a photovoltaic system. More than half of the energy consumption is being covered by that. And within the building, we also have, well, a couple of colleagues from essentially assisted living facilities. So the, well, overall ESG metrics is not just a bit of greenwashing. This is really the core of our business here. While on the photo you see primarily IT equipment, we do that for essentially any kind of technology. So obviously, when you have 80% of your business in IT, then you will end up having a majority of the equipment being handled in the technology center, also being IT. Well, but as I told you, we also do have decades of experience in the industrial space, and I would like to take a few examples from there. We do have a substantial installed base in, for example, forklifts. That's where specifically in Central Europe, we have a large install base, lots of customers. Also, everything that goes into, well, technology for supply chain, well, logistics and all that, production machinery of all kinds, including robots, for example. But, well, something maybe a bit more down to earth, something that everyone can relate to is vending machines. We also, well, have models where essentially we take the investment for the vending machines and our customers just operate them. And then we can have either, well, a kind of a traditional financing behind, or we can go beyond that and have a kind of a paper chocolate bar or whatever it is model, offsetting risk. Like, well, think about the COVID situation that we had last year. Well, when you have vending machines sitting on the platform in the railway station, nobody's traveling, you're not selling chocolate bars. That's the kind of risk that we can easily take, and that we can have also implemented in a, if you will, in a consumption-based model or as a service model. Generally speaking, there are rarely any limits to the kind of technology that we can work with. We do have a very diverse set of technologies in our existing installed base. That is not a complete list that you see on the slide. It's just giving you some ideas of what we have been doing in the past and, well, what we could do also in the future. It's really not limited to this. The only thing that we absolutely do not do is real estate. When talking about the consumption-based models, how does that work? Well, essentially, when we are discussing consumption-based models, we just take any metric that you can come up with. Typically, today's equipment is metered in every possible way for, well, sometimes just for use cases like predictive maintenance and that kind of stuff. But we take any metric that is a good fit as a basis for billing the customer by. Typically, that is being done by our customers for use cases where the equipment is being bought for a specific scenario, a specific load. The equipment is typically very long-lived, usually much longer than that specific requirement exists. So in this example, a pump, well, you buy it for specific pressure and flow. And if that changes over time and you may need a larger pump, a smaller pump, potentially you just want to upgrade at a later time to a more efficient pump, well, the pump may live 30 years easily, but your requirement may change in 5 years. So what we can then do is essentially build a model based on, well, what is the remaining value, the residual value of that pump after 5 years. We're going to ask our team and the technology center, they are going to come up with a very accurate estimation, and we're going to build a consumption-based model with, well, essentially the difference between the purchasing price, the expected fair market value at the end of the term, and, well, billing that by the metric that the customer intends to use it by. It's not just plain breaking it down. Obviously, there is also going to be a significant allowance for fluctuations. So there's no one size fits all, but essentially we can build a model that easily fits for, well, most use cases, and we can offer it in many geographies. That does work for, well, heating, that works for industrial goods, that works for, well, lighting, if you will. So essentially, it's not that difficult to do when the one important aspect that, well, introduces risk in those scenarios is typically what happens if the equipment is going to be underutilized. Maybe you need to go with a very short contract term because you don't know how your business is going to develop. All those risks you can address when, well, like us, you're essentially earning your margins from remarketing the equipment afterwards. So really the circular economy is part of our business model, the core of our business model, I would say. So if such an asset is going to be underutilized, well, that's bad for us, clearly, but at the same time, it's not as bad as it could be, because in the end, an equipment that has been utilized a little less is going to get us a bit of a higher remarketing value at the end. Also, when working with vendors, we make sure that they include, well, the vendor-specific maintenance service, so the equipment is also going to be maintained very well. Ian talked a bit about risks and uncertainties that need to be addressed. I will not go into all of these now again. So, well, we're going to discuss in the Q&A session, and I am absolutely going to be available for any follow-up conversations. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon, for that insightful presentation. And indeed, the schedule was pretty packed today, so I'll quickly jump on a few minutes of Q&A. And thank you also for the audience to having written your questions in the Q&A. I see already quite a few questions were answered, which is great, because then I can jump directly on some of the questions we personally had for our panelists. So I'll take the first question to Laetitia, which is, how is the current market for as-a-service models? And you partly answered on your presentation, of course, but is it an attractive opportunity?
Yeah, thank you, Dimitris. No, of course, I mean, as I mentioned before, the market is highly fragmented, but there are a lot of attractive opportunities out there. We have seen specifically that servitization business models currently have a very strong momentum, and they're growing quickly across different sectors, since there are a lot of industrial and also public sector entities that do not consider energy management as a core activity. So as such, many of these clients potentially seek to outsource these activities, and the energy as a service model does offer a highly convenient and attractive value proposition for them. On the financing side, I would say that so far, very little was done to tackle this market. I mean, we tried with our 400 million invested so far, but we believe that energy as a service has a huge potential and will definitely become a key sector over the next 10 years. And it's one of the core businesses for our fund, this servitization model.
Thank you, Laetitia. I'll take my next question for Ian. So Ian, how can finance providers help the efficiency as a service servitization journey?
I think Laetitia did a pretty good job of explaining this already, but maybe just to recap, and it also keys into a bit of what Simon was saying. There's an element of risk transfer, and there's an element of value creation, crystallizing the potential of the residual value. Obviously, upfront, that's reflected in the periodic payment or the outcome-based payment, depending upon the particular go-to-market model. From an OEM's perspective, again, might require some partnering and some risk sharing and some pooling, but the ability for them to use somebody else's capital rather than tying up their own, and as I mentioned in the presentation, the revenue recognition topic is a really, really big one still for certain OEMs. So the finance community can play a great role there. I mean, certain actors do that themselves. So certain OEMs in different markets, have built their own captive finance organizations because they understand the value and the power of this particular model. But at the moment, I would say they're few and far between as it relates to the as a service model in general.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Thank you, Ian. And as the next question, it's connected to the topic you touched based on. Simon, how easy is it really to embed a residual value for more complex applications, such as, for instance, big heat as a service systems or cooling as a service when you look at HVACs for large real estate applications?
Yeah, generally speaking, that can be tough to get a good estimation of that fair market value. And for traditional banks, it's probably even tougher because they specialize in, well, money, not in heavy assets. And so, well, our technology centers have a good deal of experience with all kinds of technology. And well, for this kind of specific equipment, it's obviously a bit harder than for a piece of, well, a server, a piece of storage, or, well, some IT equipment. But still, that can be done. And we can typically achieve quite high residual values for that. So it's more important than, well, the type of equipment is that it's high quality and well maintained over the, well, overall duration of the contract. So there's not the risk of getting back a piece of junk. Well, once it's well maintained, then typically that can be done. We get a good residual value, and the risk for us is well understood and contained, if you will.
Totally, and I guess there it's also adding to the point that Ian mentioned earlier, the value of digitalization, which brings today really that remote monitoring, knowing your asset, how it's being used, and using the data to the value of the circular economy, really.
Exactly. One aspect that is being overlooked most of the time is when you operate something more efficiently, typically it wears a lot less. So it's not just energy consumption going down, but maintenance need going down in lockstep.
Totally.
I think another concrete example, sorry to step in, Simon, but
Yeah.
just on that theme, we've seen it with some clients recently. A bit of a set shift, if I can get the words out coherently. Really taking decisions based, it's on this condition point, and even thinking through what's the next cycle of that equipment going to be. So not even thinking what's the most profitable thing to do in that particular customer installation, is thinking, okay, this may come back at some point. What are we going to do with it? And taking proactive decisions around getting the equipment ready and productive for the next life cycle. And that's just a dramatic difference to how most OEMs think about the world, but it can create a huge value potentially.
Also, when talking about the revenue recognition challenge that you mentioned before, right? Well, what happens with that second life cycle? In our experience, it's a lot easier to have this meaningful conversation with an OEM that has their own refurbishing and, well, essentially second life equipment department, and, well, a vendor that decided that they are going to build a business model out of this. It does not mean that we have to do it ourselves. Quite contrary, we really like working with OEMs that decided to go down that road, because typically that means that, well, what Ian just mentioned, someone has spent a thought before what is going to happen once the first customer stops using it, and it's going to be, well, transferred back to, in that case, the vendor for refurbishing and then selling it again to the next customer.
And the other thing, which is maybe also worth keying in on this topic, is for the OEM, if they're thinking this through, you may well be able to redeploy this in a target segment that you haven't been able to reach previously because of the price point. And you know that gives you a broader customer base for one, but if they're smart and in this kind of model, you also deploy this with the services. And as Ian said from Aston, you know, the margin for the OEM or the service provider, typically very, very different to the margins made on the hardware itself.
Well, on the revenue recognition, if there is a renewal of the underlying project contract, then the counterparty could just recognize the receivables which are generated from this contract. And then in that case, there would be no issues with the accounting treatment. Sorry for jumping in.
It's okay.
Yeah, Perfectly
No,
fine.
and actually, I had so one last question, and then we'll have to hand over to Arnaud. Is for you, Laetitia. It's along these lines as well. How can projects be de-risked and bundled together to reduce the transactional costs in your scenario?
Yeah. So what we do is that we de-risk the projects because we do this smart, if I can call it that way, without sounding too obnoxious, but smart financing models such as sale of receivable structure. That's why I was mentioning the recognition as a receivable before, because these would allow us to bundle small projects together, since we know that the average size of energy efficiency contracts is very small, and create this tripartite structure that I showed before, whereby each party takes on a specific risk. And of course, projects can also become more attractive when there are, for example, take or pay clauses in there, or some standardized contract or other security mechanism in place. But in general, I think that as opposed to banks, so specialized investment funds such as Suzy Partners, for example, are a bit more flexible, and they can develop bespoke financial solutions for energy as a service, and in this way you can try to meet all of the counterparties' needs, meaning the ESCO, but also the technology partner or the end customer.
Super, that makes sense. Many thanks, Laetitia. And I think we reached our time limit for a session. So before anything, I would like to once more thank our panelists, our speakers, for sharing their valuable insights today. So many thanks, Laetitia, Ian, and Simon. And stay well, and looking forward to continue our collaboration. So now to finish our first virtual series session on efficiency as a service, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Arnaud from EIT InnoEnergy, who will share the concluding remarks of this first session and also the upcoming activities of the project. Arnaud, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Dimitris. Let me just share my screen with everybody.
You should be able to share a screen.
Yes, I think everybody is seeing my screen now. Is that correct?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yes, thank you for that. So many thanks to all guest speakers and panelists of today. I much enjoyed the insight shared by all experts. And unfortunately, the session has to end for today, the first virtual dialogue. So hello, everybody. My name is Arno Nijdelder from EIT InnoEnergy. I'm working with the consortium on the Efficiency as a Service project, and I'm based in the Netherlands. I will provide some concluding remarks on today's event, starting with a short summary. So today we have seen presentations on the topic of servitization from various perspectives, academic, industry, and finance. Starting with Ian Mckechnie from the Advanced Services Group. We learned on what servitization exactly is, where it is being applied, what it takes to deploy servitization, and how it can help to accelerate the implementation of innovative, valuable customer propositions, which can also benefit energy efficiency and environmental friendliness. Subsequently, we heard presentations from 3 industry players, Eduardo Moreira of Signify, Alex Weil of Delta EE, and Thomas Sanz de Santa Maria of Green Yellow. This showed how servitization can be deployed and what additional impacts can be provided to customers, such as no upfront capital expenditures, less hassle, and lower operational costs at the same time, which also comes from energy efficiency. Furthermore, topics included financing of the providers, comparisons of various contract forms in respect to performance and behavioral risks, which of course may influence the decision of which contract form can be most sensible for, oh, excuse me, there was one click too early. which contract form can be most sensible depending on a particular situation for both the customer and a provider. In the second session today, which was guided by Dimitris, we heard from Susi Partners, Letizia Koradeski, Invigors EaaS, Ian Robertson, and CAG Meridian's Simon Lutzenberger. The presentations showed how finance can play a critical role, and already is, as a catalyzer in the uptake of energy efficiency. And it also showed which solutions and practices are available already to support companies to make a transformation towards servitization, both financially and also on areas such as IT. We'd like to give 4 main takeaways, concluding remarks. First, servitization can accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency. As you have heard already on my previous slide as well, this is demonstrated by the business models which remove barriers for customers, such as the upfront investment, hassle of optimizing advanced technologies, while providing additional customer value and making them more successful. Second, servitization can accelerate the digital transformation of industry, as the business models are synergetic with the uptake of technological advancements. IoT and digitization advantages can directly and increasingly benefit suppliers as their focus shifts from just selling equipment towards delivering a service optimally over a longer period of time. Third, servitization stimulates engagement with circular economy for the tech sector. As with servitization, providers no longer focus selling equipment transactions, but rather performance over time to be efficiently delivered. This provides possibilities for technology providers to go back to the drawing board and design solution for maximum lifetime, minimal maintenance and replacement costs, while integrating modularity, reusability, and resource recovery from the start. Fourth, Fourth point, last but not least, is that servitization can be a growth market for financial actors. As Letizia commented also, there's a strong momentum currently, and there's also fragmentation in the market. And Simon also commented that next to expertise of just money, there's also expertise needed on the type of assets that are being financed. So we think servitization requires innovative and involved financial stakeholders to overcome challenges on areas such as risk management, while they can act as a catalyzer to reach new customers with new or adjusted servitization business models. And to investors, servitization can provide access to a stream of well-backed cash flows from green investments. So, what is next? The EaaS initiative is a collaboration with BASE from Switzerland, and Agoria in Belgium, EaaS in Spain, and EIT InnoEnergy in the Netherlands. The last 3 parties are conducting the role of local market facilitators, while BASE is also working in a strong collaboration with us. And here you see 4 of our colleagues on the slide. So with today's event, we've had our first virtual dialogue. In the past 12 months, the EaaS initiative has already worked on developing a toolkit. This includes a technology agnostic standardized contract. So this can be used for cooling or heating or maybe another type of service. We also developed a pricing tool, developed financial structures to enable recapitalization of providers. And for today, our aim was to increase the general awareness on servitization in these local markets. And this is only the start of our activities to increase the uptake in Europe. So in October or November, our second virtual dialogue will be hosted. And here we will go a little deeper into servitization, the challenges for new actors who are aiming to engage in servitization and to bring some new refreshing perspectives. And second, we will introduce the following activities, as well as the EaaS developed servitization pay-per-use business model, and announce workshops and trainings, which will be organized in a subsequent period. and where we provide tools, guidance, and insight to enable the market adaptation for technology and service providers, clients, and financiers in the Netherlands, Spain, and Belgium, and subsequently the rest of Europe. So we are already much looking forward to get into contact with parties interested in exploring this further with us. So yeah, in this slide, you find our contact details. Please don't hesitate to contact us should you have any questions on today's topic or anything particular. And we would surely be keen to come back to you and assist you if we can. And final note, the recordings and the documentation of today's event will be shared with you afterwards. And finally, we would like to thank everybody who participated today, including our audience, and also my colleagues from the 4 organizing organizations, and also, of course, our guest speakers who brought a lot of expertise and interesting insight to today's sessions. And I do not have any vision on if there are any remaining questions, Dimitris, that are maybe open on my screen. Otherwise, I think we can finalize today's event. So yeah, I guess thanks again, and I would like to wish everybody a great summer break, and hopefully we'll meet again in October or November or earlier.